we cannot go through life just continuing to live without questioning, being reflective, understanding, does this actually help me to be the best version of myself? Or is this a crutch that I hold on to and band-aid so I don't actually have to feel the discomfort of what that actually feels like, right?
Welcome back to Work is Third. I'm your host, Dawn Hunter, and I'm really glad you're here. Today's guest is Ger Carriere, a serial entrepreneur, artist, speaker, and healer whose life has been dedicated to helping women and Indigenous youth establish a creative process to find their authentic self and belonging through healing and self-discovery. This conversation is an invitation to sit with yourself, question who you've had to be, and imagine what becomes possible when you commit to who you truly are. Let's listen in. Hello, Ger, and welcome to Work is Third.
Thank you so much for having me. How are you?
I am feeling wonderful today. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. How are you?
I am excited. I am also just feeling really grateful. I'm excited to see what's going to come out in this conversation. We've been waiting for this for a long time, so I'm pumped to just jump right in.
Me too. But before we jump right in, I would love it if you could share one word, and maybe that word is excited, but share a word to describe how you are today.
Well, if I really, get past all the noise and the surface level stuff, I would definitely have to say I am, the first word that's coming to me for some reason is somberful. And I don't even know why.
Okay.
I think that tells you a lot about like my character and the things that I like. I like very, egalitarian philosophy. I like romance essentially. So to use a word like somberful is like, where did that come from? But I think where it's coming from is there's a lot of gratitude, there's a lot of joy, there's a lot of reflection, there's also a lot of vulnerability. And so it's somberful in the sense of like, I feel at ease and at peace, but also kind of like in a state of like, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. And I also was thinking a word that came up for me as you were talking was reflective. So it's like being at peace. It sounds like you have these different emotions going on, but it's also pushing you to a point of reflection, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. And also like in the reflection piece, it's a lot of like, oh wow, I've done that or I've been able to achieve that and just all of the feelings that come with that, that sense of pride and being able to, accomplish goals or to be at this place in my life where, I've strived for a long time. So again, it's an active force of abundance and joy, but again, that reflective piece is a big piece of it. So, yeah.
Okay, well, let's dive into some of what you do and what you have accomplished because you really are a creative powerhouse. And I know that you, among the many things that you do, is help other people to tap into their own creativity, specifically women and
Yes.
Indigenous youth, right?
Yeah.
And find healing in that. So, how did this become your calling? How did this become work that you're doing in the world today?
Wow, that's a huge question. If I were to go way back in the day, I grew up as most people who are Indigenous do, right? And again, I will start off by saying that I'm Indigenous. And for those people who don't know what that means, it's kind of like a North American Indian, if you will, because again, people will understand what that means, but I'm Canadian, if you will. But that's interesting because we actually don't consider boundaries. So the whole continent itself is considered Turtle Island, right? So again, we don't believe in any of those barriers. And Indigenous just means the first of the people of that area. And so, lots of people are Indigenous to wherever they're from. But the reason I like to say that I'm Indigenous is because, of course, the fact of, our people were abolished and there were systematic governments and policies that were put in place in order for our people to be, erased. And so the whole history, and I don't like to go too much into that because it can be very heavy, but I like to talk about that because, it is so important to give homage to the things that have made you who you are today. And so the reason I like to, I pull from that because of course I get great strength from that. And then of course it really sets the stage as to the work that I do, right? Like I usually like to start off these talks by reading something. So if you don't mind, I would like to ask the invitation to close your eyes for a second. And this is for all the listeners who are going to
Oh,
listen to
okay.
the podcast as well. If you could just close your eyes for a second.
Okay.
This is called Wild Woman. I come from a line of wild women, a line of broken dreams and promises. with sand in their eyes as they cried and blood pulsing out of their wounds. Wild women, hopeless and wild, torn but not defeated, defiant and without, dirty but not spoiled. I come from these women, strong like fire and soft like water, with captivating beauty. Their souls like whispers and their hearts like thunder. And they breathe through me as if to support me and who I am to become. With all their hopes and dreams set along with mine, we are wild women. We cannot be tamed. So now you can open your eyes. I like to start off all of my talks by reading that, because to me, that was what started everything for me. And when I read that, I kind of go into this visual of my great grandmother. And she's standing in a field somewhere and she has, a handkerchief over her face. And if I really hone in on her expression on her face, she kind of has a scowl of like a lot of expectation, a lot of like restraint, if you will. And so when I tap into that, what is that trying to tell me? And what I learned from that is all of the women who have come before me, whether it's my mom, her mom, my great grandmother, great, every woman who has come before me has had to sacrifice a part of themselves, a part of their voice, a part of what they wanted to do in order for the next generation to survive. And so imagine that. Imagine wanting to fight back and to say, no, you're wrong, and to exercise your power, but you had to succumb and surrender. And so I look at all of that. And whenever I talk and whenever I'm doing this work, it's very important for me to draw on that, because if all of those women got to say, be, and do all of the things that they actually could, how differently would I be? And so it was out of a state of survival. And so now it's my turn, and it's my turn to speak up. It's my turn to step into those footsteps and to be bold in what I do. And am I going to be quiet? Am I going to not push as hard and be as aggressive and to actually do it as fiercely as possible? Absolutely, I'm going to. And that is the invitation that with all of the work that I do and everything that I say, that is the invitation to everybody that I want to spill out to them, is that people have paved the way for you to be doing what you're doing right now. And if you were to actually hold that as sacredly as it is, how differently would you live? People have sacrificed their lives, a whole bunch of, relationships, money, everything that makes us human beings. And again, it's your time right now. So how are you going to carry that legacy? How are you going to carry that torch forward? And are you going to do it boldly, or are you just going to let it slide by you? Right. So I say all of that to say that everything I think that has happened to me to be here at this precipice right now has prepared me to be the service leader that I am today. And so where I found, things that weren't happening the way that they should have been, I took those things as invitations for me to actually provide solutions, to be a solution-based leader, to be positive. And that's how I chose my life to be, which was, I'm not going to be another statistic or a reason why people believe in fear or hatred or dissension. I wanted to be a solution, and I wanted to be a positive, optimistic person.
I also want to be a positive and optimistic person, and I think quite a bit about legacy. In fact, I would say when I was younger, I suffered from a serious depression, and for many years. And I was not the person that I could have been. And I certainly wasn't as kind and loving as I could have been, even if there were reasons behind it. But as I got older and as I started to heal, I did start to think, I want to leave a positive impact on the world. And I want other people who grew up like me, maybe who suffer from similar challenges to me or have a background like mine, to know that it's possible to heal and to overcome and to change your generational legacy, and then to create a better path forward for the people who are going to come after you. So I really think that's so beautiful what you were just saying.
Thank you. When you were just talking, you kind of gave me a light bulb moment. I have obviously a lot of mentors that I look up to and people who I've drawn from their strengths to help me to be this type of leader. And one of them just so happens to be Tupac Shakur. You know him, right?
Love Tupac.
His name is going to be brought up so many times in this conversation, but he did I think it was an interview one time, and he talked about how it's very hard for any person to have to carry the legacy of their family. Right. So, for instance, they'll be young people and they'll have their uncles and aunts sitting around like, oh, your grandfather was like this, and oh, they were like that. And, it's like, you get these heirlooms that are passed on to you, these characteristics of, the people who have come before you. But in the instance of Tupac, he was like, for Black people, we didn't have that. We had music. That was our legacy. That was how you were going to hear my perspective. And I really related to that because, again, as Indigenous people, not a lot of our value and our legacy and that stuff gets passed on through wealth, right? So again, in other instances, people, you get houses when you're 18, you get a new car when you graduate, you get a inheritance, and you're carrying on a legacy that was already pre-planned for you. So that's the biggest difference, especially for Indigenous people, is we are the ones who are having to create the legacy. We are the ones who, because again, we don't value the same things of this world. And so we're having to combat people who are 20 steps ahead of us. Right. And we value things so much differently because it's not necessarily the value of the material things or money or all of those different things. It was who we are as a person. Our wisdom, our knowledge, our true wealth came from having the ability to pass on and give things to people, right? And it didn't necessarily have to be physical things. It could be a lesson. It could be a wisdom that I have been able to overcome, and I'm able to give it to you on a platter to say, hey, if you do that, this might happen, right? So I take great value in the fact that, yes, our inheritance doesn't look exactly the way that it does for the rest of the world, but it's just as valuable, if not more so. And so that's why when I created my business, it was all about oral tradition. So again, going back to the Tupac thing was that, it's a hell of a job for any young person to have to carry the legacy of their family. But for a lot of us, it's not an option, right? And again, a lot of people will take that and see how hard it can be and just be like, I'm good, And so for me personally, I always had this feeling that if not me, who? And it's going to stop like these generational dysfunctions and chaos. And it's going to stop with me. So imagine having to combat all of the different things that get passed on to you. Because yes, it's hard work, and we're not perfect. We fall down and we fail and we cry and we get upset. But it's like when you get past all that stuff, it's getting back on your feet again and getting clear and focused on what this is about. And at the end of the day, this is about people to have the option to be able to see that, hey, I can come from all of that and I could still turn that into something beautiful.
I have, within the last year, I got a new therapist, and we have been doing internal family systems work. And one of the exercises that we did was create your family tree, and then with each person, identify what is a legacy that they have passed on to you of any kind. So in some ways it could be good, which is a work ethic, but in some ways it might be bad, like negative coping mechanisms. And really understanding what those things are that the people who came before us passed on to us, but then journaling too about how am I changing that legacy? How am I taking the best parts of my legacy and strengthening them, but then also recognizing where there were barriers or challenges and saying, no more, I'm going to change the future for my descendants. And it's such a great exercise. And I don't feel like people are intentional enough in trying to explore that. And it's such a beautiful concept to think about. Like, you don't just inherit property or money, you inherit relationships and you inherit stories. I think about story and I think about the world we live in today and the lack of stories and connection that we have that creates challenges for community.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so interesting that you brought that up. Thank you for that. I've always been very deep in, self-growth, self-help. I've been in therapy since I'm 17, which I think is the only reason why I'm like a half decent human being today. But a lot of that is you do have to be committed to your own self-mastery and your excellence. And that is something that has been something that I identified at a very young age. I did have role models, but I only had people around me that I didn't want to be like. right? Like I saw the dysfunction, I saw the chaos, I saw the problems. And again, I don't put blame or give excuses to those things, but I do understand that, we are a product of our environment. And so if you didn't learn anything new, nobody pulled you aside and held your dignity and said, hey, what you're doing is wrong. And let's figure out how we can do this together, right? Because there's a very different way of teaching people things by the way that you're being taught, right? And for me, a lot of the way that I was taught, I recognized at a very young age that I didn't want to perpetuate these things. At the time, it was more so I isolated and kind of closed myself off because I recognized that I had to survive a lot of those things. And it wasn't even a safe space to even voice those things. So I had to get through in order to be able to get to a place where I felt safe enough to actually understand what did I endure. And then once you're able to do that, it's like, okay. And this is where we talked briefly about the house analogy, right? I talk about this in my book, which is I truly believe when you're born, you inherit a house and the house is your body, right? And we talked about how it's not only your values, your standards, your morals, it can be your physical appearance, any ailments that you have, mental illnesses, thought pattern, like there's so many different things and layers to it. But again, once you become an adult, you can say, hey, I don't like those curtains or I don't like those dishes. And those, again, are values, standards, morals. And you can get rid of them and then put other things in place, right? Things that actually serve you and make you feel good. And so that work has to be done, right? Like we cannot go through life just continuing to live without questioning, being reflective, understanding, does this actually help me to be the best version of myself? Or is this a crutch that I hold on to and band-aid so I don't actually have to feel the discomfort of what that actually feels like, right? We go through life and we go through relationships. And again, relationships are mirrors of ourselves. And what they're meant to do is to teach you the sides of yourself that you're uncomfortable with. And they hold a mirror to you to say, hey, you're upset here. This is triggering you. And that is an invitation again to actually look at that side. Where does this come from? Where did I learn this? Where did I abandon myself? What do I need to do to get myself over this so this no longer continues to be a crutch in my life going further, right? So to me, life is a beautiful cesspool of problems and it's a beautiful invitation to look at yourself. So again, yes, we do inherit a lot of stuff and it doesn't have to be the end all be all. And I'm very, very struggle with people who are very matter of fact about things because it's like by doing that, you disallow new options and new outcomes to even happen to you. Because it's like, how could you be that fixed in something when you haven't been presented with an entire story? Right. So it's all a
Yes.
matter of choice.
I feel like this is really hard for people to do, though. One of the themes that comes up quite a bit on this show is conditioning and the way that we are conditioned from a very young age to behave in certain ways, to follow family patterns, to go to school, to prepare yourself for the workforce, to live a certain life. And I have this theory now that there is no such thing as a midlife crisis. In fact, I don't think of it as a crisis at all. I think it's like people arrive in their 40s or 50s and suddenly they realize all these things that don't serve them and have not served them. And I think the challenge that comes up for people is some people don't know what to do with those feelings. They don't know what to do with these realizations. But I think people who really successfully navigate midlife are folks who embrace this idea that we can let all of that go, or we can let go of the things we don't need. And we still have opportunity to create this life that feels fulfilling and it feels joyful. It feels like we're in service to the world in the way that we're meant to be. And I love that. And that's what I'm trying to embrace. But I think a lot of people struggle with that.
A lot of it comes from, self-denial or not even being aware of it or not even being given an option to understand that, hey, that's actually not the way we're supposed to live. We're actually supposed to be fulfilled and joyful and radiate and to actually want to get up every single day to go to work. We're supposed to want to get up and to help people and to move our bodies and feel alive. And this force is supposed to emanate from inside of us and not us having to grab outside of ourselves for this stuff that's going to fill us. And that's the biggest thing is for people to understand that nobody's going to save you but yourself. And that's the funniest part of this is like, you are going to have to sit with yourself till the day you die. So you better get good at that relationship, right? Like, and it's funny because a lot of this, I only know this language because, of course, I've done it myself. I have identified myself that I have been extremely love starved. I have a lot of imposter syndrome. I have a lot of lack of self love, a lack of trust and confidence in myself because, of course, the caregivers who were supposed to care for me didn't equip me with the skills to be able to even say no, have boundaries, know what boundaries are, know how to maneuver and have discernment of what is actually good for me. I didn't have a sense of my identity and sovereignty. I was an accessory to other things, right? So again, when you are unable, I think that that is a big piece for us, is to actually look inside of us to say, that doesn't feel good for me. Right. And again, this is interesting because in COVID, I had an incredible experience to actually delve within myself. And, at the time COVID was happening and we all were sitting with ourselves, right? That's all we could do. And so
Yeah.
at the time, I took that as an opportunity because, again, I had always been very like busy with life, hurried with life, always distracted with someone else's objectives of different things. And not to say that it wasn't like I didn't get anything out of it, but it was the first time I had the opportunity to sit with myself. And in that time, I hired a sex coach, a love coach, a divorce coach. I hired a femininity coach and a business coach. And so all of those different coaches, one of the most significant things that I learned was about love and what love meant to me. I learned things like attachment styles. What I learned about myself was that I had a anxious, avoidant relationship with my mother, which then spilt into my relationship with women, right? And so I never trusted them. I always felt like they were, going to backstab me or whatever it was. And so imagine living on high guard all the time and you're looking for, they're conspiring, they're looking. And so that was why I never trusted women, which I then didn't trust myself, being a woman myself, right? And then with males, I found out that with my dad specifically, I had a anxious avoidant attachment. And basically it was like, if you let me down or if you said something to me, it would be like, off with your head. You have no relevance in my life. And so again, that spills off in relationships with men where I lack that trust for them. I lack their authority. I lack their decision making because for me, having that grit that you need to see things through and to keep your word was something that was just that spilt off to me and how I felt about myself, right? We have to understand that we have both feminine aspects and masculine aspects to our person. And we need to identify, how am I wounded? It's having those crucial conversations with yourself to say, do I express myself the best way? And what I identified with myself was that I was always showing up as the little Ger, which was like a 3-year-old Ger, or a teenage Ger, or a diplomatic, crazy, assertive, like boss, crazy Ger, right? So it was like these 3 main versions of myself that I would show up in any instance. And depending on the situation, that's who would come out. Of course, there were versions of myself in all of those people because those were armors that I took on to survive certain situations. But I was still in all of that mess, and how could I find her? And it was asking, why were you created in the first place? Why did I need you? When did I create you? What was the situation? What was I feeling? What did I need instead? And if I could be that version to love myself in those times, what would I say to her? And so, like all of those different versions of myself, I needed to create relationships with them so that I no longer needed them. And like underneath all of that noise and all that armor and masks, I was able to identify, oh, wow, there's Ger. That's who you actually are underneath all of those different versions of yourself. And so that would be my invitation to everybody, is that you need to really sit with yourself and understand, am I like this because this is who I am? Or am I like this because this is who I've had to be? And again, if you could talk to that version of yourself and you could say, what do you need? How do you need to feel loved? What do you need to say? What do you need around you? What do you need to experience? And that will heal that version of yourself. And it's not going to be one time. So you're probably going to rebel and this doesn't make sense. But you need to sit with yourself. And you need to have those conversations, because that is what self-love actually is. We throw around self-love, 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 and we don't even know what that is, right? And it is just sitting with yourself and being tender, and being that version of yourself that you needed when you were younger.
You remind me that I want to say last year, maybe it was 2 years ago now, I did a guided meditation that was very much what you're talking about, which was
Hmm.
going back and thinking about your younger self. And the version of myself that came to me was 12-year-old me who used to like to sit in the backyard and read books and lose myself in these stories. And it was
Hmm.
peaceful and quiet, and it was my own little world. And there were lots of reasons for that. But it came to me at a time where you mentioned COVID. I think COVID brought out, in some ways, the worst parts of my identity in terms of perfectionism and productivity, because I worked and I loved it, but I worked constantly and threw myself into work during that time period. And it was very peaceful, but it also, I didn't take a lot of time to rest and reflect and really indulge in this kind of gift of time that we had in many ways. COVID was a challenge. Everyone experienced loss, individually and collectively, but also we had this real opportunity, I think, to revisit the way that we live. And I didn't do that until after COVID, but I did this meditation and it helped me to realize that what I really want to be is that person who sits and reads books and has quiet and perhaps is a little bit more introverted than I thought I was. And it really kind of nudged me into thinking what you're saying is, who have I been in the past that I needed to be the decision maker, the really reliable, relative, or the person who gets things done at work, all these versions of me, and really saying, well, what are the things that work? And the other thing you remind me of is I was taught this technique. I ruminate on past experiences, and say, what could I have done differently? Or
Hmm.
I still feel terrible when I think about this moment. Was to actually visualize your current self going back, like you were just saying, and giving love to that past version of yourself. So I've done things like envision myself giving myself a hug and saying, everything is okay, right? Everything that happened in this moment is totally fine. It's 10 years later and you are doing great. And having that conversation with your past self to really help liberate your feelings around those past situations. And those are really great techniques and great tips to think about, how do we become better versions of ourselves?
Yeah, I mean, it is incredible. As you were talking, I was remembering an exercise that I usually do, and I don't know if it's the right place to do this, but I'm kind of like being nudged to like do it, but I'm also like, no, it's too much. But I'm nudged, and I'm like, I think it would be a good idea for us to actually do it, if you don't mind.
I'm
We'll try and keep it
I'm
as short as possible. So
okay.
this is for everybody who's listening, of course. So what I'm going to get you guys to do is I'm going to get you to close your eyes again. Make sure your feet are planted on the ground and your wrists are facing upwards in your on your lap. As you close your eyes, I want you, of course, to be with me and my voice. Keep your eyes closed. Feel your feet on the ground, your hands on your lap. And then what I want you to do is I want you to imagine you're in a white room, a completely white room. There's nothing in the room. The floor is white, the ceiling's white, the walls, and then in front of you, you notice a gold handle, a door handle. You see a door form in front of you. I want you to grab the door, twist the handle, and as you open the door, you notice that it's black. I want you to step into the black room, and I want you to step fully in there and shut the door behind you. Keep breathing. Now you're in a completely black room this time, and you're safe. There's nothing to fear. It's just me and you and my voice in this completely black room. In front of you, I want you to see a see through bag form, kind of like a candy bag, the one that you would buy at 7-Eleven. And it's see through and it's a big bag. And I want you to see inside of the bag, there's this silver fairy dust inside of there. It's magical. And what I'm going to ask you to do now is I'm going to ask you to start taking off parts of yourself, and I want you to put it in the bag. We're going to start off with your clothing, put your shoes inside of that bag, your shirt, your pants, if you're wearing a hat, a watch, a belt, put it inside of that bag. And as you put it inside of there, you see it floating around and you see the fairy dust moving around with it. And now I want to ask you to put your body inside of there, parts of your body. So again, your lips, your arm, your hand, your feet, your butt, all of the different parts of your body. I want you to put it inside of that bag. And again, you're still intact. You're still safe. Everything is good. Everything is great. You see all of those parts of yourself moving around in that bag. And now I want you to put anything that's psychological that you call or deem as who you are in this world. Things like your title, your job, your talents, if you're a mom, if you're a father, if whatever it is, all of the things that you call. And when somebody asks you who you are, I want you to put all of those things inside of that bag as well until there's nothing left of you. Your whole body is in that bag, your clothes, your brain, every single thing, your titles, everything that you claim to be a human being is inside of that bag. And I want you to find a little twist tie and put it on the top of it. I want you to shake all of that stuff up in that bag with that fairy dust. And you see it moving around with you, or in the bag, I should say. And then I want you to notice, I want you to step back. All of those things are in that bag, but you're still standing outside of the bag looking at it. So if you aren't all of those things, who are you? And I know you have no body right now. And what I want you to notice that is inside of your chest where your phantom body is, you'll notice there's a flicker, your heart flickering. Whether you think it's your heart or your soul or your spirit, that's what you are. And I want us to breathe again to the count of 4 into our nose, out our mouth. And when we do this, every breath that we take, that light flickers, it gets bigger, it gets brighter. So you notice it's filling up, it's starting to get bigger inside of your phantom body. It's starting to be so big that it's actually going outside of your body now. Every breath you breathe makes it bigger and bigger and bigger, to the point now where it's exceeded this room. So the white light is encompassing your whole phantom body. It's encompassed the room that you're in. Every breath you take continues to make it grow. It's bigger than the room. It's bigger than the room that you're actually in right now. As you breathe, it continues to grow. Bigger than the town that you're in. It's bigger than the city, the province, the state, if you will. Keeps growing every time you breathe. It expands and expands and expands. It's bigger than the earth now. And now you notice that you're bigger than space. Your light is bigger than space. And as you're floating in this white light, this source, the spirit, the soul, I want you to know that wherever you are right now, I'm in space personally, but I'm pretty big and I'm floating. And I want you to know that that's who you have always been. Everything and nothing all at the same time. Perfect, complete, on purpose, loved, great. I want you to just bask in that for a couple seconds more. Imagine and feel the sensations that are going through your body right now. You know you're full of light. You know you're full of love. You're following my voice. And I want you now to come down and remember you're in this meditation with me. You breathe again. I want you to come back down to where you're sitting in your chair. I want you to wiggle your toes, wiggle your fingertips. Feel yourself sitting on your chair. Feel your body. Feel the sensations. And now you can open your eyes. So, Dawn, how do you feel?
I feel weightless. I feel fluid. I felt like I was peacefully floating, gliding maybe in the universe,
Mm-hmm.
and nothing was weighing me down.
Yeah. So imagine if we could be like that all the time here. And imagine if we knew who we actually were and if we could create from that space and we could be that with all our decisions and our relationships and everywhere we show up in the world. Just imagine how differently we would be.
I love how the meditation ties back into how we started this conversation around the legacy that we carry and the weight that we carry, and knowing what we can hold and let go of is so beautifully tied together.
Right?
Yes. I have a question for you though.
Yes.
I walk and pod, I call it. I walk and listen to my podcasts. So for the folks who are in their car driving or they're walking around the park or their neighborhood listening to this podcast, how can they stay rooted listening to that meditation?
Right. Even if you're sitting in your car and you're listening to that meditation, you can still visualize, right? While still staying awake. The reason why we close our eyes is to actually tap in and get that really deep connection with ourselves. But if you can't do that, you can still keep your eyes open, but do the breath work. Because a lot of this stuff, it doesn't have language. It doesn't have direction. It's literally the oneness with yourself. And sometimes the only way to do that is to actually breathe through that.
Well, I love the idea of breathing and releasing everything. Our world is filled with so many distractions. I think it's part of why we don't spend a lot of time intentionally exploring our inner person. So taking those moments, that was just a few minutes, right? Of saying, I'm not going to be distracted by anything else. I'm just going to be here in this moment with myself and
Yeah.
giving myself attention. I love the
Yeah.
idea of that. Yeah, that is great. I feel good. I feel peaceful on a day where I already felt pretty peaceful, low energy before we started recording. Well, not low energy, but like relaxing energy. And before we started recording, I said it's a historically cold day here in the state of Florida. And those days always make me feel more introspective, feel more like I want to think about, to reflect and to rest. And I think it's hard to do on most days. So whenever that energy exists around you, like today, I'm like, I just want to embrace that. And I think that's what everyone should do. When you get those urges to rest and reflect, do it, right?
Absolutely. Because again, what it is you're telling yourself that it's safe to be with you, right? It's like everybody knows that the whole point of this is, again, to feel good with yourself, right? So if you are the type of person who, it's like you go to the gym. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to go to the gym. But every single day you don't go to the gym, you kind of lose your trust with yourself. You lose that connection of, oh, you can be relied upon. But when you do it and you follow through, you build the conviction with yourself. You say, hey, I love me. I'm going to have my back. I'm going to be there for me. I'm going to show up for me. Right. So that's what this is all about, is building that connection to yourself to know, hey, I can rely on you. Hey, you're somebody to go to bat for me. Hey, you're somebody that I could trust. And so when you build that relationship with yourself to know that you can get yourself through hard spaces, hard things, decisions, conversations, you will feel a lot more at ease and a lot more fulfilled and content by just being yourself. Right. And again, that's why you got to clear out the noise of, who do I think I need to be respected, to be valuable, to have my voice or my opinion heard, right? Because we all deserve the same level of respect and dignity as everybody else. So again, but who are we to ourselves, and how do we show up in those spaces before we were told who we were supposed to be, right? So that's actually what that's doing.
It's so funny and beautiful that this is the conversation that we're having, because this week I've been thinking a lot about what does it mean to be committed to yourself? And you mentioned like health and fitness. I was thinking, yeah, I have a goal this year. I wanted to end 2025 being the healthiest version of myself. And I was just taking stock of, first of all, what does it mean to me personally to be healthy? But then, am I even doing the things I said I wanted to do? And if I'm not doing them, then I'm not committed to me. I'm not committed to myself. And how do I change that, right? You have to do the thing that you say you're going to do. If it doesn't work, you have to be willing to change course. But really saying, what does it look like to take care of me? What does it look like to be committed to me? What does it look like
Yeah.
to put myself first and to be the best version of myself?
See, well, and that's why I really like this exercise today, because again, if you had every perfect condition, right? You had millions of dollars, you had the perfect health, you had every single thing that you wanted, how differently would you live? How differently would you show up? Who would you have around you? How would you dress? How would you conduct yourself? What kind of job would you have? Those are the type of conversations we need to have with ourselves. For me, one of my dreams, like my dream is to sell at Madison Square Garden. And when I say that to people, they're like, whoa, that's like what, but I'm like, no, it's absolutely possible. What do you mean? And for me, it's like until your Delulu becomes Trululu, Like that's how I believe. I'm like, literally, there are no limits. There's nothing that's impossible. Because to me, it's like, why wouldn't I want the best of things? When you have that feeling of yourself that I deserve the best, I deserve all the good things because I have done the work. I know what I deserve. I know what I want to experience. And when you've had those conversations with yourself, or say you even get there and you're like, this is one night, this is, I didn't think it was going to be like this. So maybe it's something else that I want, right? But the fact that you went through that and you now know, hey, that isn't actually what I wanted, was something else, right? So again, it's the purpose of going through the journey. And that's why people say it's so cliche. It's not the destination, it's the journey. Because again, it's building that grit and that relationship and that connection with yourself to be like, hey, I got myself through that. I'm a go-getter, right? And that's what it is. It's you take the wins and that helps you to feel confident. It helps you to feel conviction in who you are. And that's why it's so hard sometimes to kind of go through those spaces and ride through with it when you know that it's going to take a lot of persistence and consistency and showing up for yourself, because it's hard work. But the payoff and the finish line is surpassing anything, because it's not really about the destination at all. It's about the feeling that you feel. And that is what true happiness is. That's true contentment and fulfillment, is the feeling that you feel about yourself because you did that.
This is a beautiful way to start to wrap up our conversation. Is what is the journey that we're on, and are we fully in it for ourselves and fully immersed in this moment in our lives? Before we wrap up, I do want to ask you the 4 questions I ask every guest.
Okay, let's
And
go.
they the first question is, because you talked about boundaries, you've talked about how you care for yourself, how you pay attention to yourself. So what is something that is really easy for you to say yes to?
Wow, a lot. I'm like, for me, it's anything to do with music, it's helping people. Those are my 2 big ones. So it's a really quick and easy thing if I'm going to be able to get a feeling of I helped somebody's life be better. I joke a lot. I'm like, with anything that I do, whether it's a podcast like this, I'm like, I'm making dreams come true. What do you mean? And they're like, what? Right? Whether it's HR or doing a speech or singing a song, or because to me, every single thing that I do is being of service to other people, whether it's just showing them this is something you can do. This is something that, is possible. That for me is the biggest payoff, is to have other people around me know that something's possible because I myself have been able to do it, right? So helping others is huge, and it has to do with music. Something with music has to be there. Yeah.
I think you are the first guest to say music, but I am with you. I think music and the sound is the soundtrack of our life, right? Any kind of music.
Hey, let me tell you this one real quick thing that I like to say, the power of music. Now, Dawn, what was the first sound you ever heard?
Probably my mother's voice or my father's voice. I'm going into like the delivery room when I was born.
Because you're smart. But it was actually the first sound you ever heard was your mom's heartbeat from inside of her womb. Now, music has a heartbeat. That is the power of music. That's why it's able to take you places, remind you of things, and it takes you to a sense of belonging, to a place where you felt at home, at ease, free. There was nothing but the feeling of being there with your mother. And that is why music is so impactful for us, because it takes us there and it surpasses timelines. And you remember things, and you were elated when you were on the beach with your friends and you were doing this thing. It takes you to the future. Like, that's the power of music. And that's why we love it so much. And that's, for me, it is so powerful. So to marry that with helping people, that's where it all comes together for me.
Yeah, like thinking about music as a heartbeat. I love that. Okay, so then what is something that is hard for you to say no to?
Ooh, something that's hard for me to say no to. Huh. Does spaghetti count?
Yes. Absolutely.
It was so funny. I was doing a podcast recently and the guy goes, "Oh, when you die or whatever it was," he's like, "What's the one thing that you want to die with or something?" I was like, I mean, I tell everybody that when I die, I want like a bowl of spaghetti in my coffin. And he died. Like he was roaring loud. He's like, I have never. And I'm like, listen, spaghetti's it for me. But
It works.
no, it does, but we're not going to use that one here. Something that's hard for me to say no to. Huh. Wow. Maybe it would be not living to my best potential and like staying stagnant and staying still and not becoming the best version of myself. That is something that is a hard no for me. But I don't know if that was how we wanted it
Oh,
answered.
that's a hard no. So that's I can absolutely say no.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
One thing that comes up is sometimes people say the thing that they have a hard time saying no to is also the easy yes for them. So, for example, you can find it easy to help others, but also find it really hard to say no to helping others.
Yeah. 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 So for sure, like me, it would be not like becoming the best version of myself.
So then when you think about kind of building on that, when you think of boundaries and joy and rest and taking care of yourself, prioritizing yourself, what is something you do really well?
Well, I would say that for me, it is having a very good routine, right? It is knowing what are absolute like distractions, time wasters, things that are not attributing to me becoming the best version of myself. So that has to do with jobs, that has to do with associations, that has to do with relationships, that has to do with even my own thoughts, right? So this is not only outside of myself, but it's also inside of myself. When I understand that, there are a lot of things that am still mastering in myself where I have to be like, Ger, that's not cute anymore, right? Like you are of a certain age, you're a grown up now. You shouldn't be thinking like that or talking like that or acting like that or whatever it is to me. So again, it's having a routine, having people around me that really help me to see myself and hold me accountable when I am not my best self. Human beings need routine. They need something to go back to and follow because if you're not doing that, you're just at a whim and you're just being blown in the wind and at the mercy of what's happening to you. And nobody needs that. We need structure, order, foundation, and we need to see it through.
Magical words to me. I love routine and definitely need people in my life to help keep me accountable. So you do that really well. Is there any place that you still struggle, either when it comes to taking care of yourself or prioritizing yourself or setting boundaries? Where do you still have work to do?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say an area for me that is still really troublesome is in the area of relationships, specifically romantic relationships. That's an area for me because, again, I've been very transparent here. I struggle with, love starvation, attachment stuff, being able to give love and to receive love. And even when I do, it's like, it's seeing things clearly and not through the lens of the things that have happened to me, right? So that for me is a really huge thing, is being in relationships that are as nurturing as I need them to be. But that's the thing with that, because again, nobody knows what we need. Nobody knows what we've gone through. Nobody knows how to love us unless we teach them. So that is a really big piece, is understanding when someone asks you, what do you need to feel loved by me? Do you know the answer to that? Right?
Hmm. Right.
It's
Back to what you
hard.
were saying earlier, which is you have to know what you need in order to
Mhm.
communicate that to someone else.
Exactly. Exactly. Right. So if it's, acts of service, if it's time, if it's physical touch, there's so many different ones, right? Because just because you give love a certain way doesn't mean that they feel loved by you as well. Right. So you have to have those two-way conversations to be like, hey, that was really nice, but I would have loved this instead because this makes me feel this. So again, having those conversations with the people that you love and asking them to pour back into you the way that you need to feel it. Right. So it's scary because it's like, well, if you love me, you would do that. But again, if you don't tell them, how are they going to know, right? So that for me is a huge one that I'm still mastering, is being able to build the courage to ask for the love that I need in the way that I need it, and also doing the same for people that I'm trying to love as well.
I hope we all find the courage to ask for the love that we need in the way that we need it. I That's such a beautiful thought. Jer, I have really loved talking with you, and I just want to keep talking. But
Mhm.
as we wrap up our conversation, I'm curious if there's something that you are taking away from the conversation today.
Honestly, I think, with everything is a gift and a blessing. And we had, of course, conversations going into this conversation. And I have my notes here. I'm like, we didn't even touch on any of that. But again, that's the beauty of life, is that the conversation is had for specifically the time and the place and what was needed at the time. And again, I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be able to even show up in this way for people. It's a way that I don't always get to show up, which is, the medicine. This is the medicine of the work that I do, and it is to heal people, and it is to be a solution, and it is to be somebody who gives tools to people. And I've been doing this work a long time, and just the opportunity to be seen in this light is incredible for me. It's so healing to be able to pass these things on to our listeners and people who need this work, because there's not enough people doing the work for the amount of people who need it. So I'm just grateful for the opportunity. This was also healing for me and beautiful, so thank you so much, and I hope it is for everybody who's out there listening to this. Definitely reach out to us, let me know how you'd like the meditation, and how you're being bold and being radiant in the world. So I'm excited.
Ah, thank you, Jer, so much for the conversation, for the meditation, for the flexibility to flow with the conversation where it went. I also felt like it was very healing, and I'm so grateful that you were a guest today.
Thank you so much.
Jer, thank you so much for this conversation, for the stories, the honesty, the laughter, and the space that you held for reflection and healing. To everyone listening, I hope this episode gave you permission to slow down, to sit with yourself, and to ask, am I like this because this is who I am, or because this is who I've had to be? If this conversation resonated, share it with someone who might need it, and take a moment today to check in with yourself. Until next time, remember, work is third.